Hi and welcome to Somatic Wise. Today's video is about how I'm turning my home into an urban biodiversity oasis. So we'll be talking about biodiversity and why it's super important. We'll also be talking about certain actions that we can take as human beings that are win-win for everybody. Just a quick review. Eco-anxiety is the distress that we feel when we become aware of human actions destroying our natural environment. It can take the form of anxiety, dread, rage, and a host of other unhappy emotions. It is an absolutely normal response that we have when our world and beautiful things and places we care about are being destroyed. The problem is the whole thing often seems completely overwhelming. So then many, if not most people, tend to go into a freeze or dissociation response. We turn away from things that feel too big and too stressful, especially in the context of our modern busy and demanding lives. However, the solution is in our hands and progress is very possible. By far, the most important thing is for all of us to just begin taking steps forwards. Whatever steps feel possible and doable to each of us, such as those that I'm suggesting in these videos. And the great news is there are so many steps we can take. Better yet, many of these steps we can take not only help the environment, they can also help us. They can be fun, make our own lives better as well. That's a win-win if I've ever heard one. So in review, both people and the environment heal when people move from immobility and stress and the freeze response into effective and well thought out action. So then, these pictures show some of the biodiversity that's at my house, and there's a lot more that I haven't managed to photograph because they're really quick, these little critters. They are demonstrating that it's very possible for us to start rebuilding the web of life. We humans have damaged nature quite a bit. However, habitat restoration does work. It starts to bring the life back, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, biodiversity is one of the most important things on this planet. The biosphere is this thin little envelope of life on our planet. It's the atmosphere, the soil, and all the life in it. Everything that's in between the rocks and outer space. So the amount and variety of life forms is a huge health indicator. It's one of our Earth's vital signs, if you will, like the pulse rate of our biosphere. Biodiversity itself simply refers to there being many different forms of life. It means there's variability among living organisms. This can refer to differences within a species, that is, you can have genetic diversity within your own genes, which tends to make us stronger. Or biodiversity can be across species in an environment like a garden, a local ecosystem like coastal sage scrub, or in the Masai Mara in Kenya. It can be on a continent or across the earth. And we need biodiversity in order to survive. Life works together to survive like a jigsaw puzzle in intricate mechanisms that have evolved over many thousands of years. Each piece depends on the others. Differences in living organisms means that there's different adaptations and solutions available for surviving, and that's really cool. Now, did you know that climate change is not actually currently the largest cause of species extinctions? Nope, it's land use change, and you can Google it if you want more information. It's when people take plant and animal habitat and then convert the land into solely human uses, like when they turn wetlands into houses or open fields into shopping malls. And it's typically done without really considering the needs of other creatures. We might justify it by saying, well, people do need a place to live, and now that isn't inherently a bad thing. However, it's all about balance. We're taking way too much of it, and we have to stop and reconsider our practices and our priorities. Because all life on Earth is completely dependent on oxygen to breathe, or CO2 if you're a plant, topsoil to produce our food, and a reasonably stable climate, which is dependent on the health of the biosphere and on biodiversity. That is why many naturalists, including David Attenborough, are begging us to preserve and restore every scrap of nature that we possibly can. It all counts. So, the takeaway is that we need biodiversity to survive. Taking away the habitats, like with land use change, that sustain a variety of life is killing the ecosystems that support us all. But we can put it back. Restoration works in supporting life that otherwise would not have had that support. And that is why I've made my house into an urban biodiversity oasis. Now, these are the guidelines I have set up for my home. And in so doing, in this video, I'm talking about disturbed urban areas. Restoration outside of urban or suburban environments is a whole nother issue, and that requires specialized help from botanists and biologists. So I'm talking about disturbed areas where there's a large group of people living there, and the ecosystems have already been turned kind of upside down. So what I did is I found out what my local ecosystem is or was before industry came, and mine's called California Coastal Sage Scrub. I took away all the other exotic, that is, non-native plants that don't belong there, and I just started by planting the ones that were here before industrial disturbance came. And that's because plants are the foundation of an ecosystem. They're magical, really, if you stop to think about it. Plants make food from sun, soil, and water, and they're the first things in our ecosystem that make food that we can consume. All the other creatures in a certain ecosystem need the plants that they've lived with for thousands of years, not the ones we think are necessarily pretty and we bring them in from other places. Those little critters that depend on them don't know how to interact with those foreign plants, not nearly as well. I've read that native plants bring 4 to 20 times more biomass, that is the amount of life, than non-native plants do. So in general, you just have to find out what the natural pre-industrial plant community was in your area and start to restore that. And there's lots of information available if you talk with naturalists or botanists or biologists in your area, do some research. The second tenet in my household is to not use pesticides or herbicides. Plants that have evolved to live in a certain place tend to already be adapted over thousands of years, so they generally don't need fertilizer, chemicals, or much additional water beyond that which the climate already provides. Healthy native plants will support the local critters without the plants themselves being wiped out. I read the other day that if something isn't nibbling on your garden plants, at least a little bit, then your garden is not part of the ecosystem. Most of the pollution in local urban rivers and streams is actually from households, not from big industrial polluters. Generally, it might vary by locale. By using native plants and organic gardening, you can drop your landscape pollution that your household is outputting pretty much to zero, which is super cool. I don't have a lawn. I have mulch, which replenishes the soil structure. This allows nutrient flow and drainage through the soil. The soil has to not shed too much water, but not hold too much water. Soil structure is a whole nother video. Mulch is generally found to be very good for soil. Plus, it recycles the plant material on site back into the natural cycles of life. Good to do some research on your specific area and what it needs. Find out those specifics. Composting returns organic materials to the natural cycles of breakdown and regrowth, just like keeping the plant material on site does. So I have a compost box, and that's where the food scraps go, and they're broken down, which also supports life in the area, and that also reduces demand on trash trucks and landfills. Everything in my household is native or edible. There's no ornamental plants because they're not really contributing very much to the ecosystem. And in my semi-arid ecosystem, which is right next door to desert in terms of annual precipitation, non-native plants tend to take too much water anyway. So there you have it. So as we wrap up, I want to say that I'm very lucky to have a house where I'm able to do this ecosystem project. I really want to encourage people to post ideas for renters and apartment dwellers' participation in the comments below. Just because you live in an apartment and don't have access to a yard does not mean that you can't do this. A few ideas I have are working in garden plots. A lot of cities have plots where you can rent a space and be among fellow gardeners and people supporting plants and biodiversity. You can volunteer in parks and schools around town. You can lobby for open space with native plants and the ecosystem that they support. They're really good for birds too, because birds rely on the insects that rely on the plants. You can request permission from landlords to plant a little more ecosystem friendly plants. And you can help friends and family restore their urban and suburban spaces as well in their own land. A lot of people I know set up compost bins indoors. Worm composting bins are really good for indoor use. And then there's many people around town who usually accept compost in one form or another. You can lobby to stop the use of pesticides and herbicides. I'll just mention really briefly, there's a recent study that I saw showing a cancer increase in dogs from herbicides and chemicals on lawns. So those are some ideas. Thank you very much for watching. Take care until next time, and remember to find some joy in your life. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to support my work of getting this information out into the world, you could subscribe to receive notification of future videos. You could contribute to my Patreon account to support this channel, and of course, please feel free to share this video with others. Take care. Until next time, be well.